This program is brought to you by Training Tilt. Training Tilt is a complete toolkit for coaches, health and fitness professionals, and nutritionists. Combine your website, e-commerce needs, client communications, and training plans into a single affordable platform. For more information, please go to www.lisatamati.co.nz/training tilt.
Welcome to Pushing the Limits, the podcast that gets deep into the psyche of extraordinary achievers across all genres, cutting to the chase to unlock the secrets of their success, their achievement, philosophies, and motivations. Join us in the quest to find out what makes the movers and shakers of our world tick and what gems of wisdom we can learn from them.
Well, hi everybody, it's Lisa Tamati here, and today I've got a really special man on Skype with me who is in Wellington, Mr. Gary Moller. Gary, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lisa.
Now, Gary, you have been my trusted guru for a while now. Gary is a functional nutrition consultant and hair and tissue mineral analysis consultant, among a plethora of other things. Gary, can you give us a little bit of a background on yourself? And we know that you're the brother of the famous Lorraine Moller, who's a legend in this country, and you're an absolute legend yourself as a mountain biker, and you're quite a man, Gary. So tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your profession at the moment.
Well, I'll try to be very brief. I started competitive athletics running when I was 14 years of age. And I have basically never stopped. I've either been running, cycling, paddling a kayak furiously, or doing a combination of all of those things in various forms, right through to where I am now in my mid-60s.
Mid-60s, yep.
Yes. And the like most athletes, I completely ran myself into the dirt. I peaked probably around about 28 years of age, and then began the slow, inevitable decline, which is called aging. Despite all of my training in subjects like exercise physiology, sports medicine, nutrition, the decline was inexorable.
Yep.
There was nothing I could do about it. And by the time I was in my 40s, you could say that my athletic career was completely done and dusted. And in fact, you could say that I was the feather duster that was doing the dusting.
Wow.
And yes, I was completely burned out. I was starting to develop heart problems. I was consulting a cardiologist for atrial fibrillation. And I was down to basically a brisk walk, which was rather upsetting.
Yeah.
And in fact, I must confess that I had a cry when I turned 50 because I felt so terrible. My goal had always been to live to 100 years of age because we have longevity in our family. But I was thinking at 50, if this is how I feel, what am I going to be like when I'm 100? In fact, I wasn't going to enjoy it. I reached the point where I couldn't even go to work, and in fact, on my 50th birthday, I left my business, gave it basically away to an employee.
Wow. And
went home to look after the children while my partner, Alofa, went to work. And that's when I started to have some epiphanies. I was introduced to the interclinical laboratories hair tissue mineral analysis just by chance. I took a look at the test very skeptically, started doing it on myself and my family, and started to think, there's a few interesting things here.
Yeah.
My health began to improve. When I turned 60, I had such an amazing party, I must confess. So I got that I fell over. I couldn't get up the path. I felt so great.
Fantastic.
Such contrast 10 years ago.
So you basically turned your life around at that point.
Yes, the hair tissue analysis was the big breakthrough for me, along with questioning many of the things which I had been taught at university.
So what was your qualification, just to give people a background, like before
Lisa,
you got into
I can't hear you. Just a minute, I'm sorry. I'll turn mine off as well.
So we had a bit of a glitch there in the sound, but I think you're back with us now, are you, Gary?
Yes, that's correct.
So you were talking to us this turnaround point in your life. So what was your qualification before you had a rehabilitation centre for athletes, I believe?
Yes, that's correct. For athletes and the general public, people recovering from conditions like cancer, 90% of our income was through accident compensation, return to work programs, that sort of thing. But in a lot of ways I found that frustrating because as time went on, I felt like we were just ticking the boxes and not doing true rehabilitation. So where I am nowadays, I work independently of anybody else. I feel that I'm not answerable to anybody other than the person who comes through the door and puts their money down.
So it's client first rather than insurers or ACC or any other big pharmaceutical.
Yes.
Is that the way it is with doctors? You know, if we could just have a brief discourse on the state of the medical profession and why are we being prescribed so many pharmaceuticals nowadays?
Well, first of all, I would say every doctor you meet is dedicated, and they are in themselves wonderful people. However, I think that what is wrong is the paradigm within which they are required to work. A doctor works within a paradigm which, when dealing with chronic disease as opposed to accidents, and I think we need to distinguish between emergency medicine and the medicine that applies to the ailments associated with lifestyle stress, aging, and poor nutrition or nutritional imbalances, and exposure to things like environmental toxins, chemicals, that sort of thing. The medical model for those is, I think, the wrong one. It's a very masculine approach as opposed to the nurturing approach that we should be applying. You cannot beat somebody into good health. You have to nurture them. Yep. And that's the big difference. So the model that applies to emergency medicine simply does not work for dealing with chronic disease or lifestyle or aging type conditions.
So all the big ones like diabetes, heart disease, thyroid, the autoimmune diseases, all of these things are not being managed as well as they could be.
Hopelessly mismanaged, in my view. You see, the medications for every one of those that you just rattled off essentially dealing with symptoms. They're simply, they may be necessary in an emergency to buy a little bit of time. But in the end, the solution is in lifestyle, it's in stress management, it's in nutrition. There are no drugs to cure diabetes, for example. There are no drugs to cure nervous disorders. There are no drugs to cure heart disease. All that happens is they suppress the symptoms. And in a lot of ways, that's nuts.
So they're not getting to the root cause behind these problems.
Yes, and you've got to burrow deep into a person's physiology and as I said, take a nurturing approach. Your body has an innate desire to move towards a state of good health and to stay that way. All that we should be doing as health professionals is helping to nudge the body, provide the tools that allows the body to do what it desires to do. And that's the approach I take. And I'll tell you what, Lisa,
Yep.
it works. It absolutely works.
And you've seen it on yourself and thousands of other patients
Absolutely.
that have come to you, and I myself am one, and I don't mind sharing with the listeners. I've been on a journey for the last, couple of years now, really, but the last 7 or 8 months, quite dramatically, with I've got fibroids and adenomyosis in the uterus, and this is causing major havoc, and out of desperation. And I went to Gary, and we've had health and tissue analysis, and we're working through the situation that I've managed to get myself into. And if I look at my situation, I was on the birth control pill for my entire adult life, basically. I'm, been an extreme athlete, and obviously done some pretty terrible things to my body. if we're honest, like you, I burnt myself out. And Gary has been doing the hair and tissue and working through. And we're not through my problems yet. We'll have to have another Skype in 6 months' time when we're through this drama, won't we, Gary?
Yes.
But the approach that Gary has taken makes sense to me, where the modern medicine is saying, chop it out, chop the offending organ out, and be done with it. And, I'm fighting to not go down that route. Whether I will have to in the end, because I've left it too late, is yet to be seen. But if someone had told me earlier, for example, Gary, give us a rundown on the birth control pill.
Well, in my opinion, the contraceptive pill is the largest uncontrolled experiment ever had on the human race. Literally half the world's population have been participants in this study. Well, it's not even a study. It's just an outright experiment.
Yep.
And I actually think the consequences are intergenerational, and that it's not necessarily what you have done in your lifetime, Lisa, but possibly your mother and her grandmother and her mother.
Mm-hmm.
And these things tend to be amplified, or the negative effects tend to be amplified as you move through the generations.
That's like DES, for example, wasn't it? The drug that they put women on back in the 40s and 50s or whenever it was. And the women of today are having breast cancer, or they're having effects from that experimentation basically done. And that's a known
Well,
fact.
I've got hair tissue analyses here where I've tested like mothers and daughters, and you can see the way that certain patterns, measures of health are magnified as you move from the mother through to her offspring. And what confirms that for me is you don't see the same pattern so much with the father's side. Yep. So now the reason for that is you see, if these things were, or family trends were entirely genetic, you would see a significant contribution by the father to the patterns that we see in the hair tissue mineral analysis. I don't see that pattern at all. But what you do see is you see a very strong pattern coming from the mother's side, and the mother's mother. And that is because the child spends that time gestating inside the mother's womb, and when he or she pops out, they are literally a carbon copy in terms of their nutrient makeup, their hormones, as with the mother. And then as time goes by, the child develops its own unique makeup. What you do see is that even 20, 30 years later, you can tell the mother and the daughter by having similar patterns. But what tends to be the case is that the daughter's patterns tend to be more pronounced than the mother.
Yep. So it's worsening.
It's getting worse. Yeah.
And so if we look at take the birth control pill, What sort of things, and this is not just me and Gary talking here, there's quite a number of books being written on about this recently, the side effects of the birth control pill, things like autoimmune, thyroid, leaky gut, Crohn's disease. Have you seen women, like myself, who've come out the other end, tried to go off the pill, and all hell's broken loose?
Yes. Well, what happens when you start playing around with a woman's hormones is that you can end up with, for example, the most common is estrogen dominance.
Yes.
And estrogen, when it is high, it's essentially, you could think of it as the nesting hormone. It makes the woman tired. Mm-hmm. She will tend to gain body fat, and her connective tissue will start to become fragile.
Preparation for a baby.
Yep. Yeah, preparation for birth. Now, if that's fine for when a woman's pregnant, but not all the time. So you get unwanted weight gain, you get fragility of tendons and ligaments, a tendency to bruise. These are not nice things. The fragility of your connective tissue applies not just to your tendons and ligaments, but to the skin. So the skin tears easily. Think of stretch marks.
Yes.
Think of also the fragility of the lining of your gut.
Yep.
So the gut becomes fragile, easily damaged. It's just not desirable at all over the long term. There's an increased risk of estrogen or hormone-related cancers, such as breast cancer and ovarian cancer. So these things are just not desirable. What we really should be doing is trying to help the body balance her hormones, or help a woman balance her hormones so that she is healthy and vigorous and fertile when she needs to be, and so on.
Yep.
It does give a real headache, and it is a headache, and with regards for contraception.
Yeah.
And I don't have the answers for that, Lisa.
No, and there are reasons, So if we're looking at estrogen dominance in the females, but there is also estrogen dominance amongst the male population. What's going on there?
Well, yes. So the same issues that we're talking about with women also applies to men, and that if there is too much circulating estrogen, the delicate balance between the sex hormones, which makes a man and a woman, can become lost. So if there is an increase in estrogen in the male, then the balance between estrogen and testosterone is not sufficient for a man to display that physique of muscularity, the broad shoulders and the narrow hips. And that certainly is a pattern that is very common nowadays. You see it all the time with these hair tissue analyses.
Yep. This estrogen dominance is coming more into the male. Yes,
and that certainly can be another one of the explanations as to why male fertility has declined by 50% in the last 50 years or so.
Yeah, I've heard that on the news the other day too.
Yeah. Yep. Now, of course, there's a whole lot of factors, but certainly we know that many of the chemicals in the environment are estrogen mimickers. I would never feed a boy or a girl soy products if I could help it.
Yep.
Simply because they, to a degree, mimic estrogen. Likewise, estrogens and a lot of chemicals, plastics, and so on.
So
we've got to be very careful.
Yeah, so we're surrounded now with xenoestrogens, aren't we? With from our carpets through to our curtains, through to our flame retardant mattresses, through to and so we're absorbing these xenoestrogens in our body care products in all of these ways, and this is causing an imbalance in hormones as well.
Yes, so when we're looking at these things, we need to, we don't want to focus just on contraceptives. We need to focus on the entire environment. We need to look at absolutely everything that might impact in even the tiniest way upon a human being, and do the best we can to minimise these exposures, or at least minimise their impact. And in so doing, we will get significant improvements of health. Gradual but very significant improvements.
So where are these the toxins that we're being exposed to? This is things like your pesticides, your herbicides, your chicken that's got hormones put into it, so all of these things we're just being constantly bombarded with, whereas 50 years ago that wasn't the case. And this is why we're seeing a decline in fertility rates among men and women.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised, and if you combine that with the depletion of nutrients from our food,
yes,
along with stress of all kinds. So we're getting hiding from all kinds of angles, and it's a matter of trying to identify each one that might be impacting upon a person. And that's really the secret to success. You see, we were just talking about why medicine is failing with these sorts of things. The other reason why medicine is failing us is because there is this belief that there is the cure, that somebody's going to find something in a laboratory that's going to cure this ailment or that ailment. There is no such thing. There's no one shot. There's no magic big hit.
Yeah.
What we have to do is we have to look for the multitude of things that are impacting upon our health, and try to knock each one off in a systematic way.
So this is I mean, it's sensible, really, because we're complex organisms.
Absolutely. Yeah. And look, if you're a gardener or a farmer, you understand these things. You can't. There's not one thing that's going to, produce the best crops in the world, or the healthiest animals that win the get the ribbon at the AMP fair or whatever. It's a whole lot of things that come together.
Yep.
You sing to your plants, you sing to your animals. You play the nice music if you like. It's not just giving them a shot of something and think that your job's done. It's a very nurturing approach that needs to be taken.
So when we have drugs given out for various ailments, often they have side effects. And these cause other major issues. And when we, like giving someone with Crohn's disease steroids, or giving someone with cholesterol problems, I say problems, because there's good cholesterol as well, and a lot of it really is inflammation in the body. But giving them statins, I mean, what is your take on things like statins, for example?
Well, I'd like somebody to name me a drug that doesn't have an unwanted side effect. I think that's going to be a good challenge to put out there. Often what these medications do, first of all, you're talking about treating symptoms, and sometimes the wrong thing. You mentioned cholesterol. The whole cholesterol thing, I think, is one of the biggest, smelliest red herrings ever to be drawn across the path of health professionals and the public alike. As you indicated, the problem is not cholesterol, the problem is inflammation. And in fact, most chronic diseases you could say that inflammation is one of the key factors, okay? But inflammation alone is not, or tackling inflammation by way of, say, an anti-inflammatory or aspirin or something like that is not the answer. You've also got to then try and figure out the root cause of the inflammation and deal with that. So you can see how you've got to burrow deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's as you burrow deeper and deeper, you get to you get to the root cause of the root cause, so to speak.
Yep.
And drugs do not do that. By the way, as I said, talking about emergencies, if you've got a raging infection, then antibiotics are going to save your life. Right?
Yep.
There is a place for some medications, but again, it's in order to rescue a dire situation.
Yeah, when someone's dying.
If you suffer a heart attack, then thank God you live nowadays. You'll be rushed into hospital, you'll be given drugs, they will save your life. However, those drugs are not going to stop you from having your next heart attack. Or they might stop you from having a heart attack, but you'll probably end up dying from heart failure due to the side effects of the drugs.
Yeah. So there's always, even if you do take something, you've got to still go and do your homework. And everybody wants a quick fix, don't they? And natural methods and, integrated medicine and hair and tissue analysis and all these things, they take time. They take energy.
Yeah, Lisa, I spent a lifetime digging myself into a deep hole of exhaustion.
Yeah, me too.
It took me 10 years of obsessive behaviour to haul myself out of it. I'm now in my mid-60s and I'm having a ball. Yeah. I'm absolutely enjoying life.
You're giving me
the
hope.
The turnaround has been astonishing, but it was never an overnight process. More often than not, I appear to be going nowhere. It requires enormous patience, and not everybody is into that because they have been conditioned to believe that there is a quick fix out there.
Yeah.
Now, I'll make the comparison. Becoming an Olympic champion is not easy. If it was easy, then we would all be Olympic champions. The process of obtaining or achieving perfect health is like your Olympic aspirations, and getting there is not going to be easy. Yep. It's going to take a lot of hard work, and I don't want anybody to have any illusions that it's not going to be. So it's not easy.
So you want to be able to work with people who have that attitude that, hey, I'm in it for the long haul, this is going to cost, this is going to be effort, this is going to be time and some suffering, but to have the quick Band-Aid fix that you're otherwise going to be given is not going to lead anywhere except further down that rabbit hole, and then you'll have to dig deeper or you'll die. Or something dire will happen.
Yes.
So
yes, and that's what I love about my job now, and that the people who come and see me are largely filtering themselves out.
Yeah.
They're the ones who have decided that they've had enough and that it's time for real change.
Yeah. And they're prepared to take those steps and not just wait for the doctor to give them another pill and hoping it will go away.
Yeah. Look, lying back, on a bed passively saying, "Give me a shot, doc," is, I'm just not into that.
Yeah.
It's a complete waste of time in the end. In the end, you, the patient, do the healing. I don't heal anything. Okay? Yep. I don't do anything. I just give a helping hand. That's all. But the real work is done by you, the patient.
So let's look at this hair and tissue analysis, because I want to get briefly on to the topic of athletes, because I've got a lot of listeners who are athletes and who, as a coach, I worry that many of them are burning themselves out, which I have done, which you have done, which probably your sister did.
We all have.
Yeah, and that's the way we are. We're obsessive, we're ambitious, we're A-type personalities, we're disciplined. What sort of dangers do you see for athletes out there who are just going hard out, maybe ultramarathon runners, but also anything, bodybuilding, you name it, CrossFit, all these high-intensity sports, rugby players? What are some of the issues that you're seeing presenting after their, mid-30s, 40s?
Well, one of the things that, as a generalisation, is the decline from about 28, 29 years of age is attributed, and the aches and pains and the joint issues, the glandular problems, the thyroid issues, the adrenal issues, the heart problems, and that. People often attribute this to just simply getting old.
Yeah.
I used to consider that that's what I was taught. Now, most of those processes of slowing down, of aches and pains and so on, are actually controllable. They're not necessarily aging per se. And that's what's really exciting. Now, we are fed a lot of misinformation about nutrition, that you can gain all of your nutrients through your food. I can tell you that is completely untrue. That is a myth.
It's my experience
Our
too.
Our food is so depleted nowadays that we simply cannot supply the trace nutrients, the essential nutrients. Sure, there's plenty of calories in the food of today, but the nutrients that we need at the cellular level are simply not there in adequate amounts.
So we're getting too much energy-dense, nutrient-poor nutrition,
Yep.
processed foods,
Exactly.
to the nth degree. Our soils are depleted.
Yes, that's right. Yes, if you look right across the board, our food is depleted. The other thing, Lisa, is that many of the foods that provided us with those essential nutrients are now no longer consumed. So if you think of when an animal was slaughtered, and I'm going back to Putaruru in the 1950s, nothing was wasted. So we would be fed by our mother things like liver, kidney, brain, black pudding, ox tongue, oxtail, bone
Those
broths.
yucky things.
Yeah.
Yucky but nutrient rich.
We would have chicken once a year at Christmas. It was our Christmas dinner. We would have chicken. So we had all of our vegetables were grown at home. We didn't have a greengrocer. We didn't have supermarkets back then. We grew, and it was seasonal food grown in composted soil.
Lovely.
Yeah. Now that's all gone, and if you look at like chicken or noodles, where's the nutrients?
They've all been processed out of them.
Yeah, if you look at industrially produced wheat and corn, you've got to ask, well, where's the trace nutrients in the soil? The only thing that they're putting in the soil is what makes the plant grow, and that's not necessarily what a complex human being requires in order to remain healthy for decades. So our food is depleted, and now the other thing is we assume that everybody needs the same things. So if somebody says, Lisa, you need to take lots of vitamin C, who says? Okay, who says that you need to take more magnesium or that you need calcium for strong bones? Yes, you might, but the person next to you might not. We're all the same in some regards, but at the same time, we're all very different.
Yep.
We have very specific needs depending upon our stage of life, our genders, our activity, what sort of diseases we've been exposed to, what sort of damage we've done to our bodies. There's so many things that come in that we must take into account in order to fine-tune our nutritional intake. You can't have a one-size-fits-all nutrition plan. Just because somebody is a triathlete doesn't mean that they need to have loads of carbohydrates or this or that. It just does not apply. And yes.
So sorry for that interruption, people. We're having some technical issues today, but away you go again, Gary.
Yes. One of the most exciting things is that we can now burrow deep into a body's, into a person's physiology. We can look deep inside and determine whether or not you need this nutrient or that nutrient.
So this is on a cellular level.
Yes, and and we can even look at how various organs are functioning and what we can do from a nutritional point of view to support that organ. It's really exciting. It takes so much of the guesswork out of nutrition. It helps us to get to the very heart of what is health promotion.
So you're able to individualize this for people. So they do a hair and tissue analysis or a saliva testing as well, if you're into stress testing. And there you get the results that you're able then to interpret after years and years of study.
Lisa, there are a whole variety of tests that can be done. I generally will do only 3 tests. One is the hair tissue mineral analysis. That to me is the most useful one. Mm-hmm. The other test, there are 2 other tests. One is the saliva cortisol DHEA test. That is also very useful. And the other is a blood test for measuring the antibodies to about 100 different foods and food groups. Test for food allergies.
Right.
Now, so I usually will start with the hair tissue analysis. And depending upon the person's history, what their complaints are, for example, if they are having digestive issues or if they know certain foods really do not sit well with them, then we may do the food allergy test. If they are having issues with things like anxiety and depression or thyroid issues or weight gain, that sort of thing, we may do the DHEA cortisol test. If somebody is a serious athlete, we would probably do all 3.
Yep.
As a matter of course. But Lisa, you don't have to do a huge number of tests. It really comes down to just 1 or 2 and the experience of the practitioner, the person who's interpreting it.
Because they're not that simple just to look at and go, well, copper's up and cadmium's down and mercury's up. It's a lot about the ratios between things as well.
Lisa, it's taken me 10 years to get my head around the hair tissue mineral analysis.
Yeah, it's a complex beast.
I've done thousands of them, and it's only after having done my 1000th one that it's starting to make real sense. The other thing is to have the tools to then intervene, and that's the other thing that has been so exciting is the development of high-powered nutraceuticals.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about is food that has a real influence on a person's health, even at the genetic level. There are food substances that talk to your genes. It's really exciting. The first thing, though, is to do the right testing so that you take out as much of the guessing as possible.
Yep.
And then the results can be exciting, absolutely thrilling. This is why I love what I do for a job.
Well, you're turning people's lives around, really, aren't you? You're giving people who have no other options or some very poor options, like myself, another chance at a bite at the cherry to get things back on track, to get things right.
Yes. Or if you're training for the Olympics.
Yeah.
You know, and for you, regaining your health might be your personal Olympics, or winning the kayaking might be your goal. The same principles apply.
Yeah.
It's all about getting the inner workings going at absolutely 110%.
And it's just good common sense to me to always look to the root cause instead of sticking band-aids on top of festering wounds and saying, well, we'll put a band-aid on it, it's going to be fine, you're not going to get any more dirt in it. Well, that's fine, but what about the crap that's in there and it's got to be gotten out, and it is very hard nowadays to live with so much conflicting advice. I've experienced that just today as Gary and I were talking. You've got poles apart, opinions that are poles apart, and these are highly educated people on both sides of the fence saying two different things, and it is very hard for the consumer, for the average person to sift through the what's rubbish and what isn't. But I think you need to do your homework, go and see people like Gary. Gary, where can people get hold of you, and how can they get a hair and tissue analysis done?
It's very simple. All they have to do is go to Google and Google Gary Moller hair tissue mineral analysis, or they can go a step further and they can Google Gary Moller and whatever health issue they might be interested in. And the odds are that I've written some article that is now out there online that they can find.
Yeah. And then they can find you at garymoller.com.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend, because Gary has, obviously, you've just come back from Andorra. Tell us a little bit about that before we close off.
Well, I'm on a mission to prove that I'm the fittest over 60-year-old in the world. And I've chosen mountain biking because it tests most of the elements of health that decline as we get older, including the ability to bounce and heal.
Sure does.
And so it's my second attempt. This time I had a couple of administrative issues which had me at the back of the field, which is basically a death sentence in these races, but I managed to come second just
in the world.
30 seconds behind the winner. And that was very exciting because I was the oldest one in the field.
Yep.
And I'm going to go back next year and I'm going to win.
That's the attitude.
No hesitation in saying that I'm going to win.
Yeah.
And it's a way of proving that what I do for a living actually works.
And this is from a 50-year-old who was burnt out, broken, and disillusioned with everything, and now at 65, stronger than ever and healthy.
Well, 64, Lisa.
64.
Right.
Don't add another year on. We won't do that. But that does give hope, and I think for burnt out athletes out there, and there are dozens, or people who think that life might be behind them because they've reached the big 4-0 or something silly. What would be your message?
Get hold of me.
Get
hold of me. Just go to garymoller.com and or drop me an email. Just ask me what is the best action. I'll ask you a couple of questions and then I'll give you some initial advice so that you don't waste your time and money.
Yeah, and that's what I love about you too. You always keep an eye on the budget because obviously all this testing and supplements is expensive.